Hello, and welcome to this short video regarding individualized reading improvement plans in TCAPS for the 2018-2019 school year. My name is Andy Phillips, and I'm the Director of Curriculum. The purpose of this slideshow is to provide a brief overview of the third grade reading law, to explain changes to the TCAPS IRIP process for this school year, and to show you where to input IRIP information. Some basics of the third grade reading law. First, the state tells us that it's now known as the Read by Grade 3 law, formerly known as the third grade reading law, although I would argue that 9 times out of 10 you will still see it referred to as the third grade reading law. The purpose of the law, coming right from the legislation itself, is to ensure that more pupils will achieve a score of at least proficient in English language arts on the grade 3 state assessment. This is important because it tells us exactly what the target is. The target is for a student to be at least proficient on the third grade ELA M-STEP. The third grade reading law mandates individual reading improvement plans for all K through 3 students who are not on track to be proficient on the third grade ELA M-STEP. The law defines the target student population of the legislation as students in kindergarten through third grade. This means that school systems have to find students who are not on track to be at least proficient on the third grade M-STEP starting in kindergarten. When you hear the term at risk or not on target, we generally think of students who struggle. While those students are included in this group, there is also a large group of students who do not present as traditionally at risk or behind, but that do need to have IRIPs. When correlating NWEA percentile score to M-STEP proficiency, students who are proficient on M-STEP generally score somewhere above percentiles in the mid to high 50s. This is why the cut score of the 60th percentile was chosen. So in other words, just because a student has an IRIP doesn't necessarily mean that these are going to be your lowest students. The third grade reading law mandates that school districts test all K-3 students within 30 days, and we must intervene within 30 days of identifying deficiency. Third grade reading law states that students will be retained in third grade if they are not proficient on third grade English language arts M-STEP assessments beginning with the spring of 2020. This is what makes this law such a scary proposition. This year across the state, less than 45% of students were proficient on the ELA M-STEP. In TCAPS, 58.5% of students were proficient. Keep in mind, though, that students are not in danger of being retained until after the results of the spring 2020 third grade ELA M-STEP. There is no mention in the law about fourth grade students until the 2020-2021 school year. The third grade reading law allows for students to be exempt from retention in a few different ways, the most popular of which will most likely be good cause exemptions. So while the law states that third graders not proficient on M-STEP will be retained, retaining more than half of the students in Michigan in third grade doesn't seem to be a realistic proposition. I think most will end up qualifying for a good cause exemption, which is why it's so important that those students, or at least almost all of those students who are not proficient on third grade language arts M-STEP, had IRIPs prior to the end of third grade. So changes in TCAPS for this year. The first one, for the use of reporting, we're only using percentile in our cut score in our communication with parents. RIT doesn't mean much to stakeholders. Percentile is much more recognizable and easier to understand. The cut score will remain at the 60th percentile for this year, except in kindergarten. This cut score will be studied for possible revision for next year. We'll do a holistic study to see actually in TCAPS, is that a good indicator of if a student's going to be proficient or not on M-STEP? If not, we'll change it. If so, we'll keep it. The second change is that the kindergarten cut score has been modified. We're now going to go with the 25th percentile in the fall. When students take it in the winter, they'll need to be put on an IRIP if they're below the 40th percentile. Same for the spring with the 60th percentile. The rationale, as you heard earlier, to be compliant with the law, some kindergarten students will have to have an IRIP. Remember, we have to test within 30 days, and 3 days after that, if they're below the standard, they have to have an IRIP. The lower cut score will catch students that would be getting extra support regardless of legislation. The winter and spring scores should be more valid measures because they will have had more instruction. By the spring, if students are still showing that they are below the district standard, which is the 60th percentile, they will have an IRIP, even though it's for a short period of time. Now, it's really important to note that students who are above the 25th percentile in the fall in kindergarten, but who have local data that suggests that they will be below grade level readers, should be intervened on. You don't need to wait to see if they're below the 40th percentile in the winter or the 60th in the spring. The next change, what about fourth grade students who had an IRIP last year? So for those students who had IRIPs last year, first check MSTEP results. If the student was proficient, you have nothing to worry about. The second one, if they were not proficient on MSTEP, check NWEA. If the student scores above the 60th percentile in language arts or in reading on NWEA, you have nothing to worry about. Third, if the student was not proficient on MSTEP and still below the 60th percentile and had an IRIP last year, teachers will be monitoring the progress of those students by administering the fourth grade oral reading fluency assessment. Students who are at risk according to that assessment should be provided intervention. The important consideration here is that we are not going to be writing formal IRIPs for fourth grade students this year, at least not yet. Fourth grade is not mentioned in the law. If there's a new law or they revise the current law and directly mention fourth grade, we would of course have to comply. Talking points will be provided for fourth grade teachers in case parents wonder why their children who had IRIPs last year do not have them this year. It is still vital to progress monitor your students with the goal of having all or as many as possible be proficient on the fourth and fifth grade language arts MSTEP. Our team will be working on putting practices in place so that we are ready when there are third graders moving to fourth grade on good cause exemptions in the 2020-2021 school year. The final change is that data entry will now be in PowerSchool. NWEA data will be populated for you, as will many other areas. You'll have to input the area of concern for each student, as well as the school support plan. These will be printed following the same protocol your office uses for report cards. This year, we're going to stick with paper for signatures, so don't worry about any signature lines in PowerSchool. And we'll get into those in just a minute. You want to know more? One thing that I found really useful is just Googling third grade reading law in Michigan. You'll find this frequently asked question sheet that's pictured here. That's a good one to read, and it's pretty simple to understand. The law is also fairly short and pretty easy to understand. You can look that up as well. You can ask your principal or a member of the Language Arts Elementary Leadership Team, Brittany Kay, Mary Jane Collins, Mandy LeBerry, or Jenny Walter, or of course call or email me at any time. So I have logged into PowerSchool and I've pulled up one student from my roster. I'm going to go to eCollect Forms. Scroll down until I find the IRIP section, which is in the reading plan area. I'm going to click on the first one, Individualized Reading Intervention Plan. Should note this is being recorded while we're still making a few modifications within PowerSchool. So hopefully by the time you're inputting your data into this tab, things will be cleaned up just a little bit. So first thing I want you to notice that there are two different tabs. We have Reading Intervention Plan here, IRIP, and then we have Progress Monitoring section on this side in the other tab. Stick with this tab for now. We're still working a little bit on the Progress Monitoring piece, and we'll definitely be ready by the time it is time to Progress Monitor. So as you scroll down, a few things just to note that will be pre-populated are the name, grade, school. Schools will show up as numbers, but they will populate as the names of your school. Teacher. This is where you'll have to start putting information in for your students. Check all that apply, so you'll have to